One of the helpful features that we have in Excel is the pivot tables. So what they let you do is, especially in your initial analysis or when you describe a sample, for instance, it helps you to very quickly get the information that you need. So the way pivot tables work is you need to have a data set and you need to highlight it first in order to use the pivot tables. So say I'm going to use some pivot tables based on this data set. So I'm going to highlight all of this data set. You don't have to have the whole data set for pivot tables. You can only take some of the variables that you're interested in. But just for demonstration, I'm highlighting this all. And so we hit insert, and you'll see the pivot table here on the left. So you say insert pivot table. What it does, it's first of all is the range. So I highlighted the table already, and then it asks you where to put the pivot table. Pivot table results, so to speak. So you can either do it in a new worksheet or an existing worksheet, but you have to identify location here. I don't think it's going to fit here, so I'm going to do the new worksheet. So I say OK, and this creates a worksheet and with a pivot table. So pivot table is, it's kind of an area now in your data set where without the results yet. So there are some instructions here that might be helpful, but for example, you need to describe your data set, right? And say you want to know, for instance, you're writing, okay, my sample consisted of as many people, and here's the breakdown by marital status. What you do is you take one of those variables. Those are all variables, right? Our columns. So you take this variable marital status, for instance, and what you do is you drag it down. So you just drag it down to the rows field, and you see it generates the rows here, married and unmarried. So these are the two attributes of the variable, right? We can either be married or unmarried based on this data set. And if you want to know the numbers or how many people in your data set belong to married or unmarried category, you just pull this, again, the same variable down to values. So you want to know the values of married and unmarried. So how many people in the sample were married and how many were unmarried. So if we see that in this sample there are 3,176 married people and 3,000 something unmarried people. So we have the counts, right? We have how many, but we also want to know the percentages, right? So it's what we do. We also pull this marital once again to the values, and what we see here is the same. It comes here by default as the count of marital, but we don't need the count anymore. What we need is percentage, right? So what we do, we click on the count here and go to value field settings. In the value field settings, what we see is that there are different things that you can do. You can do sum, which will basically just sum all the observations with married. So it's going to be not 3,176, depending on if it's coded as 2, for instance, then it's going to be 6,000 something. We don't really need this, not very often, right? So but what we want to go to values as, so show values as, and it will calculate for you what you want to see. For instance, you can either rank them or or show the difference. In this particular example, we just want the percent of grand total. How many married and what's the percentage or proportion of married and unmarried. We hit this and we hit OK. We click OK. Now we see that there is it's almost 50-50 distribution in this data set. If you don't like the extra decimals here, you can just go to home and just decrease the number of decimals. But so here's an example of how pivot tables can work. So for instance, what we can I usually do is, I'll just so if you want to put it in your paper, what I would suggest is to copy it and insert as values. So inserting as values actually helps a lot, because what it does is it basically removes any kind of formula or any kind of like pivot table refreshing and stuff like that. So if you're ready to put it in your publication, insert it as values, and then you'll just have to tweak this into the percentages here. So otherwise, you can reuse this pivot table. You can do in the same kind of manner. You can do other things as well. But it's easier to actually have several pivot tables. So you just copy this one and paste it here, and you'll see that's another pivot table. So say we don't want to know what's married, unmarried, but we're interested in for example interested in income category, for instance, right? So let's put income category here and do the same thing, right? We go to income category as counts and income category as percentages. So here, grand total here. So that's, so for every single variable in the data set, you can do those. For every single nominal or ordinal variables, you can do those frequencies. What you can also do is another very, very, very important thing that you do typically in surveys is you do cross tabulations, right? Cross tabulations of your nominal variable. So say we are interested, so we have this variable here that we created, income dichotomous category, right? So I'm going to pull it over here, and high and low income. And then there's this variable called car category. If we go back, we're going to see there's a car category, which is luxury, economy, luxury, standard. So it's the type of car the person drives, right? So let's see what's the distribution of, what's the cross tabulation between income category, dichotomous, whether a person is a high income or low income, and what sort of cars they drive. So let's pull in the car category, but this time instead of values, we put it in a column. So this is kind of our, independent variable type of situation. So now we have, here we have the the types of cars that one person can ride, and this is the category, income category. So if we want to see what's the distribution, we should pull down the car category to the values now. So here what we see the number, right? So we see that in our data set, those people with high income, 0 people of high income drive economy cars, and most of them drive luxury cars. But again, it's harder to understand if it's numbers. It's easier to see whether whether it's if it's in the percentages. So let's just use another chart here. We can do it in the same one. It's just going to pile up a bit more. So we have the same thing right here, but instead of count of car category, we want to see the percentages, right? So show values as, and here instead of grand total, because we don't want the grand total of, we might want, but we don't want a grand total of high income driving luxury cars of the whole data set. We just want to see how many people in high income category drive, what's the proportion of people who drive luxury cars in high income, for instance. So we want to see the row totals, right? So percent of row total, and I hit OK here, and now we see here that this information is much more interesting now. That we can say that okay, 80% of high income people drive luxury cars, whereas only 1/5 of them drive standard cars, and no one of the high income drives economy cars, whereas no one in a sample of low income people, no one drives luxury cars. Again, this is a fake data set, so it's just a demonstration, remember. Another thing that we can do, so first of all, it's not always that you describe your data set, and it's not always the nominal variables, right? For instance, we can be interested in, for instance, we can be interested in interval ratio variables, right? So number variables or number variables. I guess I'm oversimplifying here, but yeah, interval ratio variables. So here's what we can do. For instance, of course, not marital. So what in our data set here, income is such a variable, right? So income is a variable that is interval ratio variable. So I'm pulling it over here, and actually nothing would happen if I pull the income over here. It will just basically list all the all the observations here. We don't want that. We just need some descriptive statistics from income. So I'm just gonna highlight it. So what we only need values here, right? Because it's not a nominal level variable, so it only has numbers or levels of income. So say we have it's called sum of income. We don't really need sum of income. What we need is go value settings. We need average income. So we're interested in how many thousands of dollars, I guess, people are making on average. So average 60.6947. We may also be interested, I'm pulling it down again, here in such statistics as minimum income, for instance, and we may also be interested in maximum income. We can also get range and another thing. So maximum income. So we see that we can also effectively pull out the descriptive statistics, for different variables that are not nominal, that are interval ratio variables. Yeah, we can also do, if you talk about interval ratio variables, we can also do, for instance, the difference of income between different categories. So for instance, we might expect that if we say income category here, for instance, and average income in every single one of those categories, I'm going to pull in this here, and I'm going to say average here, which will give us information about average income category. So we know that this falls under 45 to 49,000, but average in that one is 35.5 thousand. So or you remember the job satisfaction variable that we had before, that we created in the data set. So if we do the same thing here, so let's see, I'm no longer interested in income category, but I want to see how many people on the 3-point satisfaction scale, how much money they're making. So it seems like people who are satisfied are making more money, and vice versa. I'm not saying there's a causal link, but higher satisfaction levels are associated with higher income. So just remember, this pivot table goes insert pivot table. Before inserting, you have to highlight the variables that you're interested in. It's a very helpful tool, very easy to use, and I hope it's going to be helpful.